personal views and opinions expressed by our podcast guests are their own and are not legal advice or official statements by their organizations. Hello, my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. This is the Data Diva Talks Privacy podcast, where we discuss data privacy issues with industry leaders around the world with information that businesses need to know now. I have a special guest on the show, all the way from San Jose, California, Nitin Singhal. He is the VP of Engineering for SnapLogic. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here on your podcast. I've been a listener to a lot of great showcases, been learning and impressed by the great audience and great speakers. So looking forward to this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You contacted me on LinkedIn. We were connected on LinkedIn, and you gave me a great compliment. You say, I really enjoy that you're raising awareness about data and privacy. And I'm like, hey, you should be on the show. So I thought you'd be a great person. I am a data person. Your realm of work definitely interests me. And because I feel like if you're a data person, you can go in any direction, right? So you have to deal with data on different levels. But I would love for you to talk about your career journey in data and how you got interested in this field of work.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. When I talk about my career journey, it just makes me feel like I'm getting older, and I'm actually old. Been in the industry, in the ecosystem for 25 years now. My first 10 years of career was all building application systems and application engineering as an engineer working in US and England and building credit processing products. My data journey in the true sense started in 2006 when I joined PayPal. And that time, PayPal was actually recently acquired by eBay. And the whole goal was that PayPal to be ubiquitous. And my responsibility was to basically serve data needs for marketers and salespeople and also mitigate all those regulatory risks. If you recall, 2006, right, it was after when a lot of financial regulations were put in for anti-money laundering to basically see that every single transaction that happens is examined for potential bad funding or terrorist funding. What was the play? It was all about understanding data at that scale and be able to make those compliance and obligations to regulatory bodies. And at the same time, find enough insights to generate leads for sales. From PayPal, I moved to Visa. And PayPal and Visa always had cross-pollination of people. After building the entire data engineering team at PayPal, where I built a team of about 200 people scattered across different continents, I switched to product side in Visa, where my charter was, somebody asked me that what should be the next wave of growth for Visa? And my response was that Visa as a payment company is given, but Visa can be a data monetization company. If someone has the largest conversion data for any transaction, that is Visa. When it is processing almost 52% of, at that time, if I recall that stats, of all the e-commerce processing. Now, the challenge was who owns data? Visa is a network company. Data is owned by banks. And how we make sure that we are playing to the rules of the land. And it is basically a very transparent game. That is where started emphasizing on data governance. I incubated a team of data management, data governance to make the data rights visible for the purpose of using insights that can be used for generating transaction enrichment from the merchant perspective. So basically, my team built an ecosystem where we had the largest merchant insights repository of 125 million merchants with exact lat long at the point of transaction. And it was all in collaboration with issuer and acquirer. And we made sure that the rules are visible and it is very, very transparent. Very satisfying experience, and build an ecosystem of non-fraud dispute resolution with banks that will save hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. I had a stint at JP Morgan where my charter was to build a third-party data ecosystem, basically push all the third-party data onto AWS and put a data science machine learning layer on top of that. And again, right, one integral aspect of all of these bodies was responsible use of data. that, okay, whatever we do, how we have a layer that is actually making us honest about what we can do and what we cannot do about data. And then present those contextual insights so that way actual consumer of data is unblocked from those constraints and machine is taking care of all those rules. And we built that in short time before actually I got pushed by Twitter. Twitter and Facebook were coming fresh off of those Cambridge Analytica election challenges. There were a lot of media and regulatory eyes on them. And they wanted somebody who had regulatory experience to build a data management, data governance practice. Very satisfying experience. Some of the smartest people I worked with, and the volume of data was huge. Of course, being a tech company, it's a bottoms up culture. That means that we want to rely on innovations. And at time, smart people are so self-sufficient that they will have every kind of rules in the book in terms of processes, right? And it becomes challenging when you're trying to basically see where you have to enforce control. So one of the topmost engineering experience and satisfaction I had was building a large auditing system that will understand every single data transaction and make sure that we are putting a responsible use and appropriate controls on top of that. So that was my Twitter journey. A lot of great products, great people, satisfaction of making sure that we are using data for the right purpose, keeping users safe, as bad things can happen on those platforms. But our responsibility is that data is used for the right purpose and it is not in the hand of wrong bodies. And then Elon Musk saga happened, and I decided that, hey, I would say that I have no complaints with anybody. I feel that, everybody has their own ways of doing things. And I decided to leave Twitter at that moment and joined SnapLogic. SnapLogic, my responsibilities as a VP of engineering is to build the enterprise data orchestration system on top of the integration platform. SnapLogic is a data integration company that connects applications and data together. And one of the things that we take special pride is in making sure that the metadata and context of that data is part and parcel of how we move data around. That is what my passion is. That is what my responsibility is, to make sure that the pipelines that we build are responsible pipelines built optimally. I'll pause here.
Yeah.
Long description.
That's fantastic. That's tremendous. I think people like you are the future of technology companies, because you are, in my view, if you are a wheel, you're like the center of the wheel, right? So you know where all the data is. And when I started my career, this is before, and I'm dating myself, right? This is before the internet. No one had emails. And so the asset within the company they thought was the task or the skill that they brought into the company. And so with the rise of technology and all this data has become the company's biggest assets, and being able to figure out the best way to use it is a challenge. And as you say, thinking about data governance, thinking about regulation is definitely heating up those data points and those ways of actually looking at data. Tell me a little bit about how privacy interjects itself into your job or into your role.
I sometimes say that, can somebody live in a house without any curtains and doors? Everybody needs privacy as human being, and so is data. Anytime data is exposed for the wrong purpose, that means the endpoints and the place where that data is sitting could be in the hand of wrong people. When it comes to privacy and managing data in the responsible way, I always relate it to how we live our life on the daily basis. I call it healthy data lifestyle. What is a healthy data lifestyle? Right? Eat your vegetables, drink 10 glasses of water, do your run, and do a regular physical check every 12 months. And do not close your eyes on the facts. Monitor your blood sugar, monitor your cholesterol, monitor all those important parameters, and make sure that you're living a healthy lifestyle. It is exactly the same thing about data. In last 15 years, the crux of my experience is that at the end of the day, it is about the mental baselines, and embracing hard fact is very, very critical. So we have to make sure that data is auditable. That means, like the way we do the physical check, like do the blood test. If I'm not able to audit data, it is going to have issues. I have blind spots. And our job as data leaders or data practitioner every single day is to uncover those blind spots to bring reality to the surface. So that is practice I have always adopted, that, hey, I can reconcile data, I can audit data, who is using, why they are using, what for, so that we can ask those questions and see that it is meeting the bar for those controls. When I talk about eat your vegetables, drink water, and all of those things, what does it mean? Take an example. If I have a young child in the house and I put all my valuable documents and jewelry or cash exposed in the front room, it is going to be risky, right? So, depending, like the way I live my lifestyle, it is all about how I classify things within the house and appropriately secure them. So it is absolutely critical. Sometimes people think that data governance is actually a regulatory thing, it is boring. Data governance professionals find it hard to get traction in the tech companies. But my pitch to them is, do not plead for adoption. Create that realistic and data driven model that tells that what will happen if we do not do that. If our data is not classified properly, what is going to happen? It is all in public domain. What happened to Facebook? What happened to Twitter when data was used for the wrong purpose? And then regulatory bodies enforce large fines and ask you to do things in a very controlled way that slows you down and eventually actually can take the business impact away. So having that right data classification. Third thing is understanding data for the purpose and intent. Sometimes people think that cloud migration is fast and good and everything will be all taken care automatically. No. At the end of the day, people who have good insights and mental model about their data succeed in the data governance or privacy practice. Like, say, when somebody tells me that, hey, my GPA is 4.0 versus somebody who says GPA is 2.0, my mental model will say that where to scream and where to embrace or give a hug, right? So, same way, having understanding of our own internal data and be able to have that instinct that, okay, something is good or bad about it is very, very critical. So, three things I talked about. The data governance practice that is not just for regulatory purpose, it is for critical aspect about business driver. Second piece is auditability of the data to uncover blind spots. And third thing is understanding and building mental models about your own data. And I feel that if as data practitioner we can adopt that, we can win the world.
That's fantastic. I love that. I agree. I agree. I want your thoughts on end of life of data. And the reason why this is important is because when companies started using digital systems, even before, there were no regulations really about how long they could keep stuff, right? So outside of statutory things like, oh, you have to keep tax returns X amount of time or whatever, a lot of these data privacy regulations are doing now, this is something that you mentioned a few minutes ago, is they're basically saying to companies, they're not saying delete private data after 7 years. They're saying delete data or get rid of data or anonymize it or change it in some way or de-identify it once you've reached the end of the purpose for the data. And so that brings an end of life data challenge to companies that never had to delete anything. They just have to keep everything. What are your thoughts about that challenge and how companies are thinking about that?
Over a period of time, with the volume of data growing, there are two aspects. Sometimes they clash with it. One is how long data needs to be retained, right? There is always a data retention based on legal holds and many other things. Second piece is how long you can actually hold based on your privacy contract with your customers and based on the business you are in. And third thing is how you have to retain or delete data based on customer inputs. Like if I am into B2C model and some customer comes back and say that, hey, take me off the platform and delete all my data, I have to meet that thing within X number of days, right? And it is very challenging. Sometimes the retention and deletion comes into clashing way that, okay, what I can delete and what I cannot delete, right? The most important thing that I have learned over a period of time is having a single place and order of operations of your retention and deletion strategy. And then have it very, very defensible. When I say defensible, that, okay, one of the key thing from regulatory perspective and how we practice data is that things need to be consistent. I cannot inconsistently delete or retain data. I have to be very, very clear about what is my order of operation with respect to what kind of policies I am adhering to. And that order of operation manufactured or manifested is critical. And that is what I have used as a practice. In my past life and past companies, we retain data, what we are basically bound to from legal holds perspective. And then we delete data that needs to be deleted at the periodic intervals. Some data we cannot retain beyond 30 days. Some data we can retain for X number of months. Some data we have to delete based on reaction from the customer. But every time we do that, we go back to the same order of operations and rules engine that dictates that where it falls in that rule stack. I don't know if that answered the question, Debbie.
Yes, that actually did answer the question. I want to talk a little bit about what you spoke about related to blind spots in data. And my experience is a lot of these blind spots happen because, let's say, a company wants to do a project and they're only thinking about the benefits of that project. And they're not really thinking about the risk or the downside. And so that could be a huge blind spot. What are your thoughts?
Oh, no, absolutely. This is one topic that I really love. And wherever I have gone in last 15 years, every time I've talked about my experience or I've pitched something is an iceberg slide. And my pitch is that Titanic sank not because what it saw on the surface, is because what it could not see under the water. And that lack of awareness, that misunderstanding is what causes accident. When I'm driving the car, blind spot is what I have to take care. If I go to driving school, the biggest thing that they tell me is that how to avoid crash because of blind spots. Now, I'll give you an example of data blind spots. Say I'm sourcing email about a customer, and email comes from user sign-on or it comes from two-factor authentication source. If I end up storing both emails on the same database without defining the lineage of that, I might use data that is coming for 2FA, which is strictly for security purpose for advertisement emails, right? And then I will be in the soup if I don't know that, right? So that is an example of a blind spot. Another example of a blind spot is sometimes organizations like data governance organizations, they chase a metric saying that you have to make 100,000 data sets compliant. And they start producing numbers that we are 90% compliant, that we have 100,000 data sets and 90,000 data sets are compliant. Guess what, right? What is a blind spot here? The risk is not in the number of data set. Risk is in the bad usage of the data set. And typically, 80% of data sets are never used after the first creation of the data set. They are single-use data sets. So one of my past companies where we had such metrics of 90% compliant, I look at the usage level and found that actually there were only 20% data sets that were actively used. And that of the 10,000 non-compliant data set, most of the non-compliant data sets were in the used data set. So actually, basically our compliance metrics was only 55%, right? Again, that blind spot here was we are missing a dimension that is based on the usage. Another thing that we have a blind spot is cost. We all are working towards a world where everything is hosted on cloud, right? If I take my car off my parking lot in my house and park it in San Francisco airport, right? Every single minute of that parking will cost me. Same thing. If I take a data set that is hosted on my on-prem data systems and host it on a cloud system, the cost models will be very different. And at times, we are caught unaware about it. We make wrong judgment. And guess what? What happens is, then the same team is challenged with meeting the regulatory needs and then also the cost needs, cost constraints. So having awareness about where those issues are, where those risks are, and then be able to make right decision based on the cost factors is critical. So again, right, my pitch is ensure that you are looking at the logs, and logs is where you find answers to those blind spots. Never ignore, never trust anything based on the surface, but then ask those questions that can help you reconcile your information.
I agree. I agree. And some of it, to me, I mean, this is another deep philosophical conversation we can have, I'm sure. And it is about data literacy. I feel like sometimes people want to make a qualitative assessment when they really need a quantitative assessment, right? So people love to put numbers on stuff, but not all insights are numbers.
100%. The day we master that data literacy, and data literacy is knowing your own numbers, right? Your impact as a professional, your impact as a team, your influence across the organization increases multifold.
I agree. I agree with that completely. Talk about AI and data lineage. We know as data folks, the data lineage is really important. But as more companies are starting to use AI more and more, that data lineage issue becomes more important. For us, it's always been important, data lineage, where the data came from. But now we have regulators that are very interested in what companies are doing with data, especially if they feel like the data use could possibly create some type of human harm. And that data lineage question will become vital. What are your thoughts?
Oh, no, absolutely. Right. See, data lineage has always been a topic of interest and one of the most complex piece of things that we want to explore or uncover. With AI, it has necessitated the scale and understanding of lineage in, I would say that the urgency and the speed at which we need to understand that insights is absolutely critical. My perspective on data lineage, first of all, I feel that there are multiple definitions of data lineage. Sometimes I look at companies that actually parse the job dependency and show me a graphical representation of a data set. There is a SQL parser that actually represents the target table and the source table. My layman definition of lineage is understanding the first point of ingestion of our data. A few minutes back, I gave example of email, right? Now think about this. A single entity like email, my personal email, for example, can be sourced from, say, Axiom, who is selling data for demographic marketing perspective, and I might have a contractual relationship with them. My same email could be sourced from user sign-on, and I've given rights to that form to use my email because I'm using their service. Or the same email can be used for two-factor authentication, right? In all three use cases, if I push that into, say, some prompts for LLM and do not give them insights about the lineage, guess what? The purpose of processing will be wrong and will not be making the wrong decisions, will be making the wrong call and using the data for the wrong reasons. This is something that in my current responsibility at SnapLogic, we are paying a lot of attention, that we call it responsible pipeline, that provides the lineage context as data moves, gets replicated, stored, processed, and then replicated in different systems as part and parcel. So at any given point of time, you have insights about who is the immediate parent and where that data is coming from first point of ingestion perspective. That context and metadata is part and parcel of every single data entity. So again, right, in my opinion, understanding data lineage from first point of ingestion perspective as a context to make right use is absolutely critical. And more companies will adopt AI with ease and confidence once that information is available so that they can exclude and include the line of data depending upon where it is coming from. And I feel that it is our responsibility as technologists, our responsibility as SaaS provider to provide that insights and context as we build bridges across data ecosystems.
I've never heard anyone say it in that way, and you're absolutely right. So, at the point that the data is captured, it has a purpose at that point, right? And so the problem that companies have is they lose the purpose, they forget what the purpose is, and the data travels throughout the organization. It's being used in other ways that may create these other business or regulatory risks because they were never intended for those other uses.
I like to share this perspective that data lineage and human DNA is exactly the same analogy. Data lineage is not a bottoms up thing, it is always a push down thing. And sometimes we think that I can look at a data and predict lineage. It is absolutely impossible. I would love to have debate with those people and would share, and maybe I'll learn something new. Like, think about this. My DNA is passed on to me by my parents, right? Same thing. The lineage tag is always pushed down at the point of ingestion where that gets manufactured. A child, a data child gets lineage information from the data parent. It can never be other way around. It is always pushed down. So it's the same way the human lineage is, exactly the same way as data lineage is.
Right. And that creates that risk within organizations. And I think that goes back to governance again, where some companies had not been really well at governance. So those types of companies that maybe haven't taken governance as seriously will have trouble with things like AI because they don't really have that foundation in place to be able to track the data and to be able to explain what's happening to it throughout the process and how it travels and moves through companies. What do you think?
Oh, 100%, 100%. See, data governance is not a discretionary thing. Data governance is not an after the fact. Data governance is not just about having some tool in place that will automatically do it. It is a integral part of responsibility for every single data practitioner and engineer or a product manager, every single role in the company. And it is a collective responsibility. It is not the responsibility of a group. When I started my data governance journey, at times I actually felt humiliated as well that, hey, I'm chasing people and they are pushing me back, saying that, okay, you know what, it will slow me down. Okay, we'll do this. Are you going to be happy? And, when I look back, say, you know what, it is not for my own personal happiness. It is to make sure that we look good in the eyes of our own customers and we meet the regulatory responsibility in the most meaningful way. I'm glad that in last 10 years, things have changed tremendously. Awareness and the things that you are doing, Debbie, building those awareness. Many of you, like people who are actually very taking it as their corporate and community responsibility to build that kind of awareness. Now, every single company, I feel that tech companies as well, they pay attention. There is a huge investment, and it is no more a process governance aspect. It is very much part of the engineering and the software development lifecycle. The only thing I say is when we implement it, when we practice it, make sure that our design documents, our code scanning tools, all of those things have automation built to examine such vulnerabilities. As much as we automate the rules that govern governance, is going to be good in the hands of people. So that way, there is less of human intervention, there is more of machine enforced thing. With the advent of generative AI and AI practices all across the board, I see that how these practices will scale and adoption of governance will become more seamless as we advance.
I think so. I hope so, definitely. I actually just wrote an article recently about some of the excuses or the problems that companies have when they're adopting AI. And one of the biggest ones I feel is blaming the system. It's like, hey, I don't know what happened. The AI did some wacky thing. I have no idea what happened, but you have to have that responsibility, that accountability, transparency, and also all those things that really engender trust. What do you think?
Oh, no, 100%. It's like, see, we live in a very factual world. We cannot just put the blame on a glitch that never happened. It has to be all supported by facts. And guess what, right? Our customers and our regulators, they are not going to give us credit for those system glitches. It is our own responsibility. With such high degree of reputation and penalties at stake, I feel in last 5 years or 6 years, those kind of things have gone out of the windows. and it has become a class one citizen in any kind of organization ecosystem. So means like something happened is no more a right answer, right? Why it happened and how we avoid it is the right phrases going forward.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about human centricity and trust. So when I'm talking with companies about data and data systems, I think one of the things that is happening, and especially around regulation, is that they want to see more human centricity. So I think organizations have always been very good at understanding why data benefits them, right? But we have to figure out how that data use benefits the individual. And I think when you have that trust, people want to give you good data, right? So companies that are not trusted, they get a lot of bad data and they make a lot of bad insights as a result. What do you think?
Let me phrase the question. So basically, how companies understand the good and bad aspect about data and take actions on that, right?
Yes.
All of this is very contextual and relative. The good data and bad data, right? First is what is the definition of good in what context, right? Means I'm solving a business problem and I feel that I'm not getting enough insights, and my operational processes are not collecting enough information. There is a lot of nulls value, there is a lot of inconsistency. It makes it hard to make a business decisions about the data from the data, right? Now, second part is the risk that is presented by the data, right? The risk is that if I do not understand the context of this data, I will end up making wrong decisions. So the way I see is operational data is your business decision. If I capture too much of data at the time of user sign on, users will not sign on, and I might actually land myself in trouble. So how you basically do data minimization and baseline the definition of good and bad. So one definition of good and bad is based on your operational process. That, okay, this is a baseline. We are actually not capturing. The null value is okay. Second definition of good and bad is the depth of metadata and context that we want to infer. And that is exactly where the biggest challenge is. And that is where all the data governance professional, privacy aspect, security aspect, that comes into play. The content is one thing, and context about that content is another thing. So that is where organizations need to invest, that any point of time, that metadata, no matter how the content is exactly up to date. They cannot compromise on the metadata. The content is a property of your operational process. If user decide not to share their phone number, that is not a bad quality. That is just how my operational process is. But not able to figure out whether that is a user data coming from a sign-on or user data coming from a two-factor authentication, that is bad. If we have a metadata with nulls, that is bad. Content with nulls is a definition of operational process. So sometimes quality definition can be very, very contextual. So my pitch is define content from the operations perspective and define metadata quality from end-to-end business operations perspective. And that is where you have to have 100% score. At any given point of time, metadata quality should be good and known.
Right, right. So if it doesn't have the metadata, you lose the context, right?
Exactly.
You use the information about where it came from, what it's doing, why you should have it, and that becomes a problem. And so I think the thing you touched on is a very common thing that happens within organizations, and we see it play out in news articles about what regulators are really concerned about. And that typically is, and I think you had just mentioned earlier in an example, let's say someone took data from a single sign-on and used that information for marketing, even though it did not have the proper consent, didn't have the proper context, right? And that's a huge problem. And I agree with you 100%. The reason why that happens is because you don't really understand that initial lineage of the data, the origin of the data, and why you have it in the first place.
Exactly. Because see user consent, for example, I can start sticking user consent as the data gets into my system. But then data is used by hundreds of people, gets replicated at different storage systems, and then you lose that context because users are using and copying data using variety of tools. Not all the tools are carrying the context forward. And that is what technology needs to implement to make sure that no matter what tool I use, the context needs to flow as part of the content. So today, content and context is separated. It should not be. And technology should enforce the tight coupling of context and the content.
Wow, that's tremendous. Oh my goodness. So if it were the world according to you, Nitin, and we did everything you said, what would be your wish for privacy anywhere in the world, whether it be regulation, data stuff, human behavior? What are your thoughts?
Philosophically, I feel that when we think about privacy, we should think about privacy is like respecting our customer. And if we do not implement the privacy practices, we are not respecting our customer. The minimum our customers expect from us is their privacy and security. And if we are anytime compromising those things from our features perspective, we are not doing justice to our customer obligation. Now, the right world will be that data governance, privacy is not a separated thing or after the fact thing. It is very much part and parcels of how we develop software, how we build product. Privacy cannot be separate thing and not the responsibility of a single group. It is exactly about how we think.
Yep, I agree. I think what has happened because of the rise of these privacy regulations, a lot of companies maybe not have thought about that initially, but I think a lot of people are getting the memo now that privacy, especially when you're dealing with the data of humans, has to be foundational. And that context really does need to travel through the organization.
That's right. Adding another thing about it is, you're absolutely right. The rules and regulations are very evolving. They are becoming, like, say, not just, we are not just living in the world where one GDPR governs the entire world, right? We have rules at the continent level, we have rules at the country level, we have rules at the state level. And think about this, right? Different governments in different parts of the world, they are trying to force for data localization as well. The thing that I pitch as a technology practice, that try to capture the context about data at the lowest granularity. And this is what the jigsaw puzzle is. So that way, anytime in future we have to adopt a new rule, it is not like digging the earth again. It is about just enforcing those plug and play rules in place. So again, right, it is not as easy as I say, but then my learning over last 15, 20 years is that as much as you can reconcile data, as much as you can actually make sure that data is auditable and ensure that you have the context about data at the lowest granularity, you can meet those evolving obligations in the current and future state with much more ease and with cost effectiveness.
I agree, right? You shouldn't have to recreate the wheel every time a new law comes out. So understanding those foundational principles, understanding, just being responsible, understanding what people really want, I think helps organizations to move into the right direction. So, well, thank you so much. This has been tremendous. Wow, you really dropped some bombs on us. Some knowledge bombs. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for having me on the show. Thank you so much, Debbie.
Oh, it was my pleasure. It was my pleasure. I look forward to us, the possibility of collaborating in the future.
100%. And best of luck to you, and you're doing an amazing job.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so sweet. Well, we'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care. Cheers.